Here we go with Chapter 7, The Haunted House. On the edge of our town, there's an old house that has been abandoned for years. When we were younger, Gordon's dad told us many stories about the house. He said that the house was possessed and any kids that entered it never came out again. To prove this, Gordon's dad would point out how there were fewer kids around these days, and that he said it was because they had gone into the abandoned house. Of course, now that we were older, we knew that the house wasn't really haunted. Gordon's dad had just told us all those stories to keep us from playing near the house, which was dangerous because it was old and falling apart. It was Gordon who decided that it was time we finally explored this long abandoned house, and Paulo and I agreed. Even though we didn't really believe the house was possessed or even haunted, we had all seen enough horror movies to know that when you explored an old house, you had better come prepared for the worst, just in case. Naturally, we had a plan. Setting out for the abandoned house, the following day we carried flashlights and about 10 meters of heavy rope. The plan was to tie the rope around Gordon's waist and let him climb through the broken basement window that we had discovered. We figured Gordon could prowl around the basement, and if anything happened to him, he could yell or yank on the rope, and Paulo and I would pull him back up through the window. Arriving at the house, Gordon climbed down through the broken basement window and swept his flashlight around the room. Seeing nothing dangerous, he began to explore. Outside, Paulo and I fed him more and more rope as Gordon ventured further into the basement. A couple of minutes passed, and then the thing that Paulo and I had been dreading happened. We felt two frantic jerks on the rope, our signal that Gordon was in trouble. We immediately began to haul on the rope, pulling him back towards the window. We could feel his body bouncing off the door frames and the walls as we pulled him to safety. Suddenly, out of the darkness of the basement, a headless human body appeared. Paulo and I shouted and jumped back from the window, and then we laughed as we realized it was only an old store mannequin. Gordon's own body popped up from the basement window. Gotcha, didn't I? He laughed. I found our friend here in the furnace room. There's all kinds of great stuff down here. Come on. Turning on our flashlights, Paulo and I lowered ourselves into the basement and followed Gordon. The basement was damp and musty. There was water in one corner from last night's rain. Old broken down furniture was scattered about the floor, gnawed at by mice and rats. There were rusty tools, old tires, and cans of paint. Everything was covered in cobwebs. We shone our flashlights on stairs and cautiously climbed to the first floor, carefully testing our weight on each step as we went. Because most of the windows had been boarded up, the main floor of the house was almost as dark as the basement. In the kitchen, bits of broken dishes crunched under our feet. The kitchen table had been knocked over. Laying next to it were two broken chairs. The rest of the house was just as bad. There were moldy beds covered in moth-eaten sheets, holes in the walls, and piles of junk everywhere. Upstairs, the attic was the same, dark and cluttered. There were trunks of old clothes, dusty old books and magazines, and a large mirror on a stand. Propped up in the corner was a huge portrait of a sinister-looking man with a beard staring straight ahead. Hey, look at this, said Paulo. This guy's eyes seem to follow you when you move around the room. That gave Gordon an idea. Hey, you know our school is trying to raise money for charity this Halloween. Well, I'll bet we could make a really great haunted house here and charge admission, he said. Our class will raise a ton of money, and we would win the pizza party for sure. That's a great idea, I said. But there's one small problem. The house isn't ours. In fact, we're not even supposed to be here right now. You're right, agreed Paulo. We wouldn't even be able to advertise our haunted house. That's even better, exclaimed Gordon. It'll be a secret haunted house. Word will spread through the school, and everyone will want to come. It was a great idea, and we got to work on it right away. We worked after school and all day on Saturday, getting our haunted house ready. Gordo, Paulo, and I decided that our haunted house would not be your average run-of-the-mill haunted house with witches, tombstones, and glowing pumpkins. We figured that kids had seen enough of that over the years, and we wanted our haunted house to be unlike any other. The house was pretty spooky by itself, and with a few simple changes, we could make it a terrifying but fun experience for everyone. Word spread quickly at school, and every day at recess, kids talked excitedly about our haunted house. Admission is $1, and it's for charity, Gordon reminded everyone. Remember to bring a flashlight and come in through the basement window around the back. Finally, it was Halloween, and we were all set to go. With a can of red paint that we found in the basement, we made a trail of bloody footprints for the kids to follow through the house. Paulo sat outside the basement window collecting the money in a large jar, and I sat under the stairs waiting for the first kids to drop through the window into the basement. I saw a pair of legs appear, followed by the rest of a boy's body, as our first client entered our haunted house. Dropping into the spooky basement, he shone his flashlight around. One of the rats that lived in the basement ran by and the boy squealed. The boy gulped in fear. Spotting the fake bloody footprints, he started following them, swinging his flashlight back and forth into the shadows as he walked slowly towards the stairs. He spotted some spider webs, and thinking that they were fake, he brushed them aside. He quickly jerked his arms back as the real spider that lived in the web scurried towards his hand. Reaching the steps, the boy cautiously began to climb them. Just as his foot reached the 5th step, I reached out and grabbed his ankle. The kid screamed and ran the rest of the way up the stairs where Gordon was hiding and waiting. When the boy caught his breath at the top of the stairs and was certain that nothing was slithering up the steps after him, he shone his flashlight around the kitchen. The trail of bloody footprints led him to the living room and stopped in front of a large window. On the wall over the window was a message that looked like it had been written in blood. There's our message. Beware of being pushed out of the window. As the words got smaller, the boy leaned closer and closer to the wall in order to read the message we had written in red paint. Reading the words out loud, he was unaware that Gordon was sneaking up behind him. Just as he finished the message, Gordon pushed the boy through the open window. The boy yelled as he fell head first. He landed safely on a thick pile of old, musty mattresses that we had found in the bedroom. He sat up and laughed as he realized that he had just played a great joke on him. It was nearing 8 o'clock, and the haunted house had been a huge success. Some kids were too scared to make it out of the basement, and Paulo had to lower a ladder for them to climb back out. But many kids came through 2 and 3 times. The jar was overflowing with money, and everything seemed to be going smoothly, and then it happened. A policeman driving by the abandoned house on his usual rounds noticed some movement in the backyard and decided to investigate. He pulled his car to a stop in front of the house, and seeing the lights of the cruiser, there was an instant stampede as kids tore off in all directions. Paulo grabbed the money jar and jumped through the basement window. "Quiet," he hissed at me. "The police are here." He squeezed under the stairs with me just as the policeman dropped through the window into the basement and turned on his flashlight. Terrified, Paulo and I froze as the policeman headed straight toward the stairs. Fortunately, he was concentrating on the fake bloody footprints and didn't notice Paulo and me as he tiptoed up the steps. Following the trail of footprints, the policeman discovered the message on the wall above the window. As he leaned closer to read it, Gordon crept up on the man, thinking he was just a big kid in a police costume. He reached out to push him out the window. Gordon's hand suddenly froze in midair as he caught the sight of the waistband of the kid's underwear sticking out above his pants. Not being able to resist, Gordon reached out and grabbed the underwear, giving them a good firm yank before pushing him out the window. Hearing the policeman shouting, Paulo and I rushed up the stairs. "Run for it, it's the cops!" We shouted and took off down the stairs. We climbed out the basement window and tore off across the backyard. Relieved to see that Gordon was following us, the 3 of us ran until we reached the schoolyard, where we figured it was safe to stop and catch our breath. Quickly, we explained to Gordon what had just happened. Gordon laughed out loud. "You mean I just gave a wedgie to a cop?" Before we could respond, we were blinded by the headlights from 3 police cars as they roared into the schoolyard and surrounded us. Gordon, Paulo, and I were quickly herded into 3 separate cars where we were questioned over and over. We all told the same story about wanting to raise money for charity and that Gordon didn't know that the last kid through the haunted house was really a cop. Paulo had the jar of money as evidence of our attempted good deed. Fortunately, the police admire people who raise money for charity, and they weren't too angry at us. Even the policeman who had received the wedgie from Gordon forgave him when he saw how much money we raised. Much to our surprise, we were let off with a warning to stay away from the abandoned house, which we solemnly promised to do. On the way home, Paulo insisted that this was the last Halloween he was going to spend with Gordon. Yeah, I agreed. This is the 3rd Halloween in a row that we've spent with the police. But we changed our minds on Monday when it was announced that our class, which had raised the most money for charity, was going to be treated to a pizza party. Maybe Halloween with Gordon wasn't so bad after all.